The world was about to go to war for the second time. Millions of lives would be lost. In a secret room hidden deep in the bowels of a Polish government building, three men work frantically to decipher a German code. If they succeed, millions of lives will be saved. If they fail, the Nazis could rule the world forever. Poland had finally gained its independence after World War I, but the country knew that enemies were lying in wait all around their borders. It seemed as if their neighbors wanted to retake the land that the Poles fought so hard to defend. Polish leaders knew they needed to stay one step ahead of their enemies. In order to do this, they would need to decipher encrypted enemy communications. This would allow them to be prepared for anything. Unfortunately, war came sooner than expected when Russian forces invaded the country during the Polish-Soviet War in 1919. But thanks to their foresight, Poland had set up the Cipher Bureau. The personnel working for the organization were geniuses, and they were easily able to decipher the Russians' clunky cryptic messages. The Russians had not changed their encryption strategy since the First World War, so the Polish cryptologists were easily able to intercept and decipher Russia's military communications. This allowed them to always be one step ahead, and in 1921 at the Battle of Warsaw, Poland declared victory over the invading forces. The vital role that the Polish Cipher Bureau played in winning the war was not overlooked. It became clear that in any future conflict, deciphering codes would be the key to winning. It was lucky for the rest of the world that Poland had this foresight, because in just under 2 decades, the Axis powers would sweep across Europe. The world would be plunged into chaos, and millions of lives would be lost. However, without what Poland did next, the Allied forces may have lost the war, and we would all be living in a Nazi dictatorship right now. In 1924, the Poles intercepted a new type of encrypted message that the German Navy was using in its communications. This obviously was concerning for Poland, since Germany had not been very friendly to them during World War I. Even worse, Germany's military was growing at an exponential rate. It was assumed that new encryptions could only be bad news for whatever the Germans were planning. The Polish Cipher Bureau immediately went to work deciphering this new Enigma code. The cryptographers knew that there was trouble when the German code seemed impossible to crack. For several years, they had been able to intercept and decipher pretty much any German communication they could get their hands on. The Polish team never had a problem with breaking the German codes until now. They would later discover it all had to do with a device the Germans had developed called the Enigma machine. The Enigma machine was not new per se. It had been invented at the end of World War I by a German engineer named Arthur Scherbius. It was actually a commercial cipher machine that the military had taken and modified to make their codes harder to break. The machine took messages and scrambled them into strings of random letters. The encrypted messages became impossible to decipher without an Enigma machine to unscramble the message. There were multiple stages in the encryption process that changed the letters and randomized the code. The Poles, along with the rest of Europe, knew that they were in trouble unless they could figure out how to break the code the Germans were using. Teams of linguists from Britain, France, and Poland worked day and night to figure out how to decipher the Enigma code, but they just couldn't crack it. This was when the Polish Cipher Bureau came to a realization. Maybe they'd been approaching the decryption method all wrong. Maybe the code couldn't be broken using the linguistics method they and every other country had been using. After running through their options and brainstorming what could possibly be causing this code to be unbreakable, the Polish military decided to add the Radio Intelligence Office to the Cipher Bureau. Their new task was simple: break the Enigma code by any means necessary. The Cipher Bureau was now headed by Major Guido Langer and Captain Maximilian Choszki. It was Choszki who first had the idea that would end up saving the world. He was convinced that in order to break the Enigma code, the Poles needed to shift away from the linguistics approach and bring in mathematicians. The key to cracking the encrypted messages wasn't hidden in letters but in numbers. Choszki had taught a course at Poznan University about cryptology, and it was in this class that he encountered 3 students who excelled in the field. Their names were Marian Rejewski, Jerzy Rojicki, and Henryk Zagalski. All 3 of these men had already been doing the work that Choszki knew was needed. They were using mathematics to break codes. He immediately brought them on board at the Cipher Bureau and put them to work breaking the Enigma code. After months and months of frustration and very little progress, the team finally caught a break. French allies had gotten hold of highly classified German documents. One of these documents was a manual for the Enigma machine. The Poles had already hypothesized that the Germans were using some kind of device to encode their messages, but had no idea what it was or how it worked. But that was all about to change. The French shared the manual with the British and the Poles, who immediately began using it to figure out the exact methods the Germans were using to encode their messages. Now that the young Polish cipher team had the manual, they were able to make headway on how the code was being generated. It was Marian Rejewski who finally figured out how the rotors and connections within the Enigma machine worked to scramble the messages. This allowed the Cipher Bureau to build replicas of the German Enigma machine. They were finally getting closer to breaking the code. However, the team found out that just having the machine was not enough because breaking the encrypted messages took far too much time. Rejewski developed a solution to this as well. He and the team built electromechanical machines called bombas that could speed up the decryption process. The mathematicians had finally done it. They broke the Enigma code and could decipher German messages quickly. But then something incredibly frustrating happened. The Germans either found out that their messages were no longer secure or someone leaked the information to them because they added another set of encryption devices to their machines. Once again, the Polish cipher team was in the dark. In 1936, with World War II looming on the horizon, the Germans began changing the settings of the rotors in their Enigma machines much more frequently. Previously, the rotors remained the same for months. Then, when they did change, it was just a matter of time before the Polish mathematicians figured out the new settings and could begin deciphering the messages once again. Now, however, the Germans were changing the rotors in their machines daily, and the Poles couldn't keep up. It seemed as if the Cipher Bureau was back to page 1. Not only were the rotors being constantly changed, but the Germans had added another layer of encryption to the keyboard of the machine that had increased the number of ways the message could be encoded. Rejewski and his team worked around the clock to make adjustments to their own machines, which would allow them to once again decipher the German Enigma code. Their painstaking work paid off, and by 1938 the Polish Cipher Bureau could decode around 75% of German messages. However, the Germans kept adding layers of encryption to their codes. Rejewski and his team kept up with the changes and developed ways around the layers of coding. In 1939, they could break the codes on around 95% of German messages. Then the unthinkable happened. As 1939 progressed, the Polish Cipher Bureau deciphered more and more military communications from the Germans that indicated war was imminent. They knew that their country was going to be invaded, and since the rest of Europe was dragging their feet and taking the new Nazi threat seriously, the Poles needed to make a difficult choice. Should they hold tight and try to defend all the hard work they'd accomplished on their own, or should they send their cipher team, replica Enigma machines, and bombas decipherers out of the country and give them to the French and the British? As September 1st approached and the invasion was about to get underway, the Poles made the decision. The Cipher Bureau handed over all their work and their machines to the French cipher chief Gustave Bertrand and the head of the British cipher team Alastair Denison. Once the French and the British were given the Cipher Bureau's resources, they realized that the Poles were light years ahead of where they were deciphering the Nazis' messages. The main reason for this was because of the mathematical code breaking that Marian Rejewski, Jerzy Rojicki, and Henryk Zagalski had employed in their methods. Over the past several years, the French and British had continued using a linguistic foundation to try to break the Enigma code and had made little progress. It was the Poles' information and machinery that allowed for future breakthroughs on codes used by the Axis powers. The Nazis continued to modify their machines and encryptions, but the foundation that the Polish team had provided for the French and, more importantly, the British allowed them to build the machine that would save millions upon millions of lives by helping end the war. This machine was the Colossus computer at Bletchley Park that allowed Alan Turing and his team to decipher the Enigma machines that the Axis powers were using during World War II. The Cipher Bureau's work also made it possible for the British team to eventually break the German Lorenz cipher that was even more sophisticated and was used by the Nazis toward the end of the war. If Turing and his team did not have the foundation set by the Polish mathematicians, the war may have ended very differently. Even if the Allies had won World War II, it would have taken much longer, and there would have been many more casualties. Luckily, this didn't happen thanks to the code breakers in Poland. Unfortunately, at the end of World War II, Poland was forced into the communist rule of the Soviet Union. During this time, Polish achievements were suppressed, and the communists controlled information coming into and going out of the country. The heroes of the Cipher Bureau were all but forgotten. Recently, the Polish government has fought hard to make the accomplishments of Marian Rejewski, Jerzy Rojicki, and Henryk Zagalski known to the rest of the world. They are finally being recognized for their contributions, and even have a plaque dedicated to them outside of Bletchley Park. We here at the Infographic Show are happy to help spread the news of how Poland helped save the world, even if it couldn't save itself. It's crazy to think how, without the early contributions of these cryptographers, millions more people might have died during World War II, or that we might all be living in a Nazi empire today. Now watch Most Terrifying Weapons of World War II, or check out CIA spy techniques, the shoelace code, and other secret spy techniques.